Hello HEMA friends and welcome to this new video. So today I'm going to comment a selection of really interesting sparring exchanges which I had with my new HEMA friend Gonzalo Peregrin in Spain, in Granada, at the beginning of the spring, during the event Ritorno alla Spada, in which I taught a seminar. So without further chats, let's start. So the exchanges are, at the beginning, are kind of easy. We start probing each other. I try to go for the openings I see directly open, the legs in this case. Then I go for the arms. My opponent did the same. I didn't start the video from the very beginning. There are a couple of more exchanges. We were probing each other. Then we start understanding what we are able to do, and then the, let's say, most interesting part of our sparring happens. So here is the first really interesting action of this video, and it is a really cool example of the German concept of Krieg. If you are familiar with German longsword, here it is. So look at this beautiful action. So my opponent keeps control, takes control of my weapon. I parries, goes for a low threshold, expecting to find my arms. They are not there. Does a cavazione while I am trying to, let's say, parry or keep control of the opponent's weapon, and while trying to land the fendente after it, and keeps going in the same position. Stabs me on the arm basically. He says, "Oh, yeah, it was a shallow thrust, whatever," but for me it was good enough, and the action was really good. Let's watch it again. Beautiful. So you see, okay, so here there is an exchange of thrust of mine, but I want to point your attention to something which is happening here. So you see this false edge mezzano toward my hands. You will see it happening again a couple of times, and it is a really interesting pattern, which is mezzano toward the hands to make the opponent feel threatened, and then going for a thrust, which is happening right now, but not the same timing as you will see later. It is not a, let's say, an action, a complete action. So here that's interesting. Gonzalo was going for a bind in a very good way. So he binds my sword, takes control of my weapon, medio on weak, and goes for a step in the same direction. So he's very strong. Gains enough line to land his action. But what happens is why my thrust lands anyway? Well, I am taller. This helps me a little bit to gain advantage when I am in a stupid position, let's say. So partially is luck. But what betrayed him was his foot movement. So he started stepping into the action before extending the arms. And I started extending my arms before he started extending his one. So that's the only motivation why my thrust landed and his one didn't. So yeah, so always remember to extend your arm first. That's the rule. Oh, too much backward in time. Yeah. So probing each other and just trying to figure out what to do. Not easy. We were kind of surprised of each other. We were kind of different in our styles. So I decided to add this double, not because it's cool, doubling generally is not considered cool, but because it happens for a motivation, and it is easy to see in this exchange, so we can learn something from it. So what happens is that we are exchanging blows, and we keep staying at a distance, which is a very bad idea. So we are close, and we are at a distance in which we can exchange blows and hit each other, and we keep staying at that distance too much. So you see that we are still very close. I can hit Gonzalo's arms by extending my weapon completely without even stepping, and he can do the same to me too. But we are crossed there, and we are actually doing, like, we are not able to land actions. I try to land the Sotano, he avoids it by just a tiny bit, and so we do not retreat, we do not disengage. And this is what makes the double happen, mainly. So we should have gone backward, reset, and started creating something new from the beginning. That would have been a better idea. Instead, we are both stubborn, and we decide, okay, I will stay here. I will profit from this kind of action which started. I will try to do something smart. We both see the outside line which is open. And I suspect we at the same time we thought, I will go first and my opponent will parry. Because when you go for the outside line, that's it. So if the opponent parries, everything is good. If the opponent attacks, you have like a super open to doubles, right? So we thought the same thing at the same time, and we started the action at the same time. So this is the kind of double which happens. I made a video about it. I said double can happen for a variety of motivations, and I explained them. Some doubles happens by pure chance. This double happened, well, because we started the action at a very close range, which was a bad idea, but it was also by pure chance, because by chance we started at the same time. And it was impossible for us to stop or change through our action, because we were too close, and so there was not enough time to change our action. So the thrust of Gonzalo was slightly better than my one, but we got each other. So look like a similar thrust, but actually is on the inside. So here I try to steal the attention of my opponent. I do something similar to what you will see later. I go for the hands with a Sotano. So this generally steals the attention of the opponent and make the opponent think about lower openings, or at least consider them a little bit more. So you see, I just moved my weapon slightly downward, and my opponent was closing the line because he was scared to receive another cut underneath the ends. So I played on this kind of thing, and then I launched my straight thrust. Nothing like super smart or whatever. I just landed a plain thrust which landed on the inside of the elbow of my opponent, or shoulder, something like that. And then I tried to oppose as much as possible. So bothering down and going up. This is my favorite action Gonzalo landed, because it's a very smart use of footwork. So now look how he approaches me, going sideways and forward at the same time. Now there is people which says side movements are extremely important, you always have to move sideways, etc. There is people which says, oh, you should never move sideways because it's stupid and the straight line is better, etc. Like, the straight line is better to control distance, because you are faster, like your legs are made mainly to move forward and backward, especially forward. So it is easier to move on this kind of direction. Moving sideways is a little bit more complex, you need more technique, etc. It is generally harder to pull off under stress, but if you do it at the proper distance, so out of distance, and you do it in a smart way, like Gonzalo was doing, so you can gain a lot of distance without showing it too much of a threat while doing so. Also, look at this kind of step. He lands his heel, enters distance, bit by bit. His torso is still backward compared to where his foot is. And this, of course, was like making me feel still comfortable with this kind of distance. Then he lands with his entire foot, and of course his torso moves forward. I see the torso moving forward because, of course, I'm not looking at the feet. I look at the head, or generally speaking, the upper torso. So I see the torso moving forward, and then I move backward. Look at this thing. This is super cool. He compensates this kind of movement with his aggressor. So we are basically moving in the same direction, more or less at the same speed. And then here is where I still feel comfortable, because like it seems that we are more or less at the same distance. So I say I have time to go backward, but here is when the thrust happens. He accelerates a lot because that movement was meant to charge the step. And here is when the speed of his action gets higher and he gets me. So it's a beautiful action. Well, it wasn't really fast, right? It was just so well organized that I was like, oh, damn, you got me. Snipey the hands. Remember, when you got hit and you do it because of distance management, snipe the hands. Do not make your opponent get into distance. So, very terrible mix of Tverkau and Sotano here. The idea was like I thrust, I make the opponent parry, and I go for the lower opening because I noticed that it was viable. But I have a very, as you can see, compared to my Sigi, I am using a Black Fencer longsword, which is actually really cool as a longsword. I really like it, but I'm not using it anymore to this short handle. What happens is I move in a slightly different way generally. So yeah, my form is terrible in the sparring because I had just one day to adapt to this this sword, and it was not enough at all. This is beautiful. So not on my part, of course. So I had added this action because it's super funny. Now my opponent overbinds me. I parry. I thrust. He parries. Overbinds me. So this is at this point I should have grabbed the sword. There was a point like a couple of years ago in which I was like super fast at doing it. I landed 1,000 grabs doing my sparrings and even tournaments. But now I am not super fast anymore at doing it, and I missed the timing. So this was the time in which I should have already grabbed the opponent's sword or hands, even the right right hand or arm. Sorry. So I wait. Too bad. I needed time to understand I was in this kind of situation. That kind of option was possible. If you need to think to land an action, is already too late if you are in the middle of an exchange, of course. Look at my hand, which is full of hope. Please let me grab your sword. Nope. Super funny. Frustrating, of course. So this exchange was sick. So look at it. I go for a thrust. I open up. My opponent goes for his low Tverkau, which during we had 4 sparring matches. He landed it sometimes, and then I was like, okay, so not a very good idea. I have to always go back with my hands to not get hit from this kind of Tverkau. So I basically parry. I control the opponent's sword, because you know what happened before, like Krieg, right? I control the opponent's sword. I avoid any kind of action of my opponent, and you see this beautiful opening. It's like giant opening, and I say, ha ha, you are mine. And he manages to parry in Posta di Donatella. Now open the Pisani d'Ossi de Ghetti look at the image and you will notice that this is posta non altera by the book. So a posta can be a parry, a posta can be a charging action, a posta can be everything. So this is an example. And I end this beautiful exchange with the most sad action possible, of course, sniping the hands. So here a couple of really interesting actions happen. So it wasn't this one, of course it was interesting, but the next one is the one I am talking about. Do you remember when we were talking about, I was talking about the false edge mezzano that Gonzalo was landing to like threaten me and bother me and steal my attention? So look at this. Whoop. So this was really interesting, so much that I ended up stealing this kind of pattern. So what happens is that there is a little bit of bind play. From the position he ended up reaching, he tried to snipe my hands. I go backward, fine. It's like okay, so I am at a safe distance. That's exactly what makes this action work. So if you go backward, you are actually safer, right? But the problem is like you are at the moment in which you just ended an action and you are preparing something. So you are actually thinking, and that's the problem. Like I was thinking, and like so he tried to snipe my hands. The action I tried to create wasn't working, so I was like thinking about creating something new. And that's when his thrust ended up coming. So he signaled that I ended up touching him too, but that's the actual word. I wasn't able to hit him. I ended up touching him on the end. So it was a clean thrust on his part. Same pattern here, but I was able to spot it. So after seeing it, I was like, haha, so this is what is going to happen. So he goes for the mezzano for the end, I go backward, that's exactly his plan, goes for it, but I was ready this time, and I parry riposte. So you can understand your opponent if you look at him properly during the fight. So here just cavazione. In this environment, in the Spanish fencing environment, there is a lot of bind work, right? So the best idea is to use feints. So I feinted a thrust, used the cavazione and landed a thrust. The funny thing is that among every kind of fencer present at the event, Gonzalo was the best one in terms of spotting feints. So I had to work really hard to use them. He was sparing everything. Also, here notice there is an error on my part while landing the thrust, when the cavazione itself. Look at my arms, they are too close, right? If you go forward too much, extend the arms too much, you risk to get stuck into the opponent's head. But I could have done it slightly backward, which could have made me extend the arms a little bit more, which is better. And also see how I go backward with my hands. So I actually risked to not land this kind of action. Sorry. Okay, so let's move forward. Last actions. Here, if I remember well, it's a like simple feint. Oh no, yeah. Here I prepare the action, right? So you have probably already seen this kind of clip on a short which I just uploaded a couple of days ago or something. So what happens is that I scout my opponent. As you already seen, I actually tried to scout him before. I go backward. I go for this kind of movement. I try to make him react. Didn't work. So I went for it again, doing it a little bit more. I feinted actually. So you see, I started moving forward too. I've seen that his movement pattern, you see this kind of, he's in his parry position right now. So he was expecting something, and then he said, so I I parry and I go for my low throw. I said, haha, so I can profit from it. I landed my feint, my opponent seen the action which I tried to land before, goes for the parry, goes for the second parry, but the second parry is too late. So first feint doesn't work. It's not actually even a feint, a proper one. Go for it, see the pattern, and then I can profit from it. Yeah. Probably my favorite action of the sparring on my part. Here a simple feint and the reverso fendente, if I remember well. Feint on the inside, count on the outside. Super simple, straightforward. Is like 101 Fiore. So this action is really interesting. Look at it. So I expect that if you now tell me what you have seen, let's watch it again, you will probably say that it is an action on tempo. So, which in a sense it is, but if we analyze it, it is not. It is not like a straightforward exchange of thrust. So what happened is that my opponent was covering my line. So I was kind of in porta di ferro with the right foot forward in this case, and so he covers my line, leaves an opening, right? He covers the upper line, so he is like in flug, and I can't go for an upper opening without touching his sword. There is a line which is opening, which is like the torso, let's say belly line. I can thrust in it because there is an angle, but I say no, it's like too risky, and so I decide to take the bind. So while taking the bind, what was happening? So I go for the bind, and my opponent sees me going for the sword. At instantly, when I reach the sword, you have seen his footwork, so he was going sideways. I am basically, I feel that I am strong, let's say in the bind when I touch the sword, but the reality is that my opponent is not anymore in the same position as before. So he has a new line, which is not my one. And so he profits from this new line and lands his action. I was trying to land my prepared action because everything happened super fast, right? I was like, I bind, I thrust. So here I am landing my thrust, but his one landed before my one. Super cool. Yeah, so this was the video. I hope you enjoyed this comment. Tell me in the comment section if you enjoy this kind of, let's say, reviews, comments over sparring. I think they are useful because it is easier to see an application of a technique, or it is interesting to analyze complex actions, textbook actions, which happens like almost every action is a textbook action, but it's sometimes it's hard to see or too fast or whatever. Here we can analyze all of them and connect everything together. So when I explain you techniques or tactics in a video, everything happens because it is organized. Of course, I'm showing you the pattern, but it is not as watching the action working into sparring, or like watching an action which is basically based on a textbook action but is modified to fit a specific opponent or a specific situation which happens again and again in that specific fight. So I think it is useful, but you will tell me if you enjoyed it or not. So thanks for watching, people. Remember to share, a like, and a subscribe if you enjoyed the video. A lot of you which are watching this video aren't subscribed to the channel, so if you want to drop a sub, it will be I will be grateful, because you are helping me growing this channel. So thanks again, and as always, see you next time.